Hey, Laura.
Good morning. Hello, everybody. Welcome. You've tuned into Unscripted, candid conversations about who gets to imagine the future. This is a week-long series. This is day 4, and tomorrow is the last day in this incredible event. I'm Laura Nissen. I'm founder of the Social Work Futures Lab and curator of the socialworkfutures.com website, and also a newly retired social work professor from Portland State University. I've been a longtime student and now author of Futures work, and count my experiences of doing that as some of the most fulfilling of my life, both individually and part of numerous collectives that I'm part of, especially because of the incredible people I've gotten to know, like Julia. I invite you to find new energy and ideas today that spark your interest and inspiration as well. My guest today is Julia Mossbridge, PhD, founder of the Institute for Love and Time, one of the coolest names of a group I've ever heard. Julia is a person I probably met 6 or 7 years ago and was incredibly moved by through her approach to thinking about the future through lenses of literally love and time. We're going to talk a lot about that. Some might suggest these are our most important and rich resources in this life of ours, and words, concepts it is refreshing to simply hold and focus on. I can't wait to hear more about how her work is evolving and what she thinks it's important to help people connect with and join into, and as we engage in collective futuring. A few housekeeping items. We're streaming live on LinkedIn and YouTube. We are recording. The recordings will be available later today, and several are already up due to the hard work of the folks at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation team who are putting this on. We're here today to talk about futuring, anticipating, imagining, and creating tomorrows, and why we need more people, not just a powerful few, to invest the time and resources to spend time in imagining possible tomorrows. Thank you, as always, to RWJF for this platform, this space to convene. These are important conversations to be having now more than ever. And as usual, this ecosystem is full of interesting and vibrant people so committed to making the world a better place in imaginative ways. This week has truly been something. The chat is open. Say hello to each other. You are among other seekers, spark plugs, and idea generators. And just to get you going, please introduce yourself on the platform in the chat, and maybe consider the following starting question. What have you learned about what love has to do with the future in your work? What have you learned about what love has to do with the future? We're also making stickers, which is a super fun thing because, I mean, seriously, who doesn't love stickers? We're making them together with you to keep these conversations going. And the stickers are going to be made from little sound bubbles that happen throughout this week. And we've been collecting them in this really fun way. So when you hear something sticker worthy, drop it in the chat in parentheses or quotation marks. RWJF will create a sticker sheet from the conversations that you can order for free while supplies last. So that's kind of a fun thing. So let's begin. Julia, my friend, I'm going to get us started with a question. And if you could also tell us a little bit about yourself when you respond, that would be great. How did you get started doing the work that you're doing? And what have you learned about what love has to do with the future? With that, I turn over to you.
I think those are going to be the only questions that I can potentially answer in this period of time. And I'm going to have to take it one by one, because by the time I finish answering the first one, I'll have forgotten the second one. So I think when people ask, what's their story? What's your story? How did you get here? I often have to say, well, I can tell you half of the story. I can tell you the part that already happened, the part that's in the past, and the part that I'm aware of. The parts that I can't tell you are anything that happened in the past that I'm not aware of that helped me get here, and there's a lot of that. And then the parts that are coming in the future that helped pull me to where I am. We often think of the past as the only part of time. If you imagine time as like a blanket, only this part, the past part is pushing and trying to make things happen. But really, if you think of the physics of time, there's a lot of evidence that the future is another boundary condition that's pulling. And in a way can shape from the future, much like we imagine the past shaping us. So I'll tell you the story that comes out of my mouth, which is the stuff that I'm aware of and that happened in the past. But I'm very aware that that's not the whole story. And I think that's part of the point. When I was a kid, I grew up in this farmhouse in a upper middle class suburb of Chicago called Libertyville, Illinois. And I couldn't really have any friends over to the house because the house smelled like rotten eggs, because we had well water and we didn't have a water softener. And so no one wanted to come to our house. And so, I was part of Generation X and we were all feral. So we were all like running in the fields. And anyway, and I learned early on that my family was very eccentric, well-educated, very eccentric is the nice way to put it. Abusive, neglectful, and mentally ill is another way to put it. All those are accurate. And I was a kid, I don't want to take you through my trauma, but I was a kid who had to create ways in my mind to manage ritual abuse. And the way that came to me when I was about 7, 8, 9, 10 was I had this woman in a rocking chair and she had dark hair and she was in her 40s or 50s. And she would say to me during the abuse, you know what? This is horrible. You should be angry. It's okay to be angry. Your family's not okay. This is not okay. And you know what? Someday you're going to thrive. Mm. And sometimes she would even hold my hand. And this was an imaginary being. Mm. And I think it saved my life. I mean, the rest of my family wasn't as lucky. And because I had this gift of this being, who later, when I was in therapy working on the abuse, I realized was me. I didn't get my rocking chair until I was in my 30s, and now I sit in it all the time. And I realized, oh, that's me. Like, she was so wise and she was saying such good things. But in therapy in my 30s and 40s, I was asked by the therapist to go back and be with that young girl. And I said those very things. And now I don't even know if the original memory is a memory or something I made up later. It's almost like a time loop. And that's how I started thinking about the incredible value of weaving the future into the present so that it can save us when nothing else can save us. You're in an isolated farmhouse. Everyone's pretty nuts. Your friends can't come over to the house and they're, weirded out by your family. So that's one way you can add allies to your future. And then what strengthened that, just speaking of Libertyville, is we were in a time, I was growing up in the late 70s, early 80s. And we were in a time when I was just started high school where people were starting to rebel against the strictures of the 80s, sort of back to the 50s culture, this sort of idea of everything's perfect, everything's fine, the nuclear family is all there is, and et cetera. And there was a guy who kind of trained us to do that, one of our fellow high school students. He was a few years older than me. His name was Tom Morello. He became lead singer of, or guitar player for Rage Against the Machine. He helped found the band. And he was leading, he taught us even then as like bravely as he could, as like the only Black person potentially, or maybe like one of 3 Black people in the high school. But he taught us how to build underground newspapers. And I took that lesson of, you can be totally informed and try to fight your way through something or build a revolution. And that's a kind way in using this method. And I went to another high school when my parents split up, and I took that with me and I built an underground newspaper there. And then I just haven't stopped trying to get people to see the truth of humanity, which I believe is that we have this basic problem. I call it the human problem. And it's that We're really, really smart in some ways, but we still, for some reason, have not figured out how to live in harmony with ourselves and each other. It's bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
It's bizarre because there's so many things we have figured out. So I think it's solvable. And I think the future is calling us towards that mothership point in time and space. And I'm excited about that. And I got really excited about the conversations I've heard so far here relative to that, especially, I think her name was Aisha Shillingford. I think you spoke with her.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get the name right? Yeah. And she was talking about in the Congo, this belief of, the ancestors and the descendants are all in the same timeless space. Like, that's the past and the future, kind of folding in time to meet at the present. Like at first I think of it like a book, and then started thinking of it as like angel's wings. The past and the future, they're folded to meet here in the presence of what we're doing. And then that brings up the love. Did you ask me what does love have to do with the future?
Yeah, what have you learned about and you've talked about some of it, but say more about what you've learned about how love is related to the future.
Yeah, so so my ideas about love have evolved after getting involved in a project called Loving AI, which is related to the idea that we can create AI that will help us feel unconditional love and help solve the human problem of us not being able to somehow figure out how to get along with ourselves and each other. And so I had to think analytically about love. I had to think in a scholarly way about love because I had to build an instrument, a questionnaire to understand and assay or assess people's capacity to experience unconditional love. So I had to say, here's a definition of unconditional love. To what extent do you feel this for yourself, for others, for this computer, for your animals, etc.?
Wow.
And that definition is really long and kind of difficult to understand, but what it boils down to is feeling unconditional love as a human experience is feeling like nothing needs to change in you or in others in order to love or to feel loved. So I'll just repeat that. Unconditional love as a human experience is feeling like nothing needs to change inside you or inside others, like anywhere, in order for you to love or to feel loved. So it's very different from compassion, very different from empathy. It's very different from positive regard. And people get scared of it a lot. It's funny. People will say, can I call it unconditional positive regard? And I'm like, because you're scared of the word love? Because that's why, right? And it's like, yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
And it makes people think about religion, and people get scared about that because in the academic world, you're not supposed to have anything to do with spirituality or religion. That's like a separate world,
Yeah.
Which is bogus. And it makes people scared that they're going to have to love someone that they hate and that they won't have. And the number one thing, when I had this conversation with this guy who was a CEO in Europe, and he said, I just want to have a conversation with you about unconditional love in the workplace. And I said, okay. So we put it up on Medium. But the number one thing people get scared about is, if I unconditionally love myself and others, how will I have any control over their behavior? And that idea is fascinating because it suggests that they believe they actually had control over someone else's behavior before they unconditionally, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That's the fantasy.
Yeah.
So the fantasy is that we control each other's behavior by withdrawing love. And that's what we're taught, right? Conditional love, romantic love, all this stuff is like, well, sure, he loves her and he loves him and she loves her and they love each other back. But if they didn't love each other back, then the love would be withdrawn, right? Yeah. That's conditional love. Unconditional love is this kind of agape or divine love, or this it is a human experience of something that's not human generated. And that's the tricky thing, I think, for academics. And I was trained as a scientist. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist. I talk to cognitive neuroscientists about this and other scientists. And it's like a human response to the sun. So you're not responsible for the sun coming up in the morning or going down at night. And you are well aware that that's out of your control. But you can have a physiological and emotional response to the sun when you go out in it. You go, whoa, this is a different feeling. And then when you stay in your house or you're closed off from the sun, this is a different feeling. I'm not saying one is better or the other, but you will have a reaction to that. It will have an effect on you. That is like unconditional love is the human response to what I guess I would call universal love, which is like a force in the universe. That's the way I conceptualize it. So when you say, what unconditional love have to do with the future? What does love have to do with the future? I'd say universal love, this force, we will sometimes understand, at some point we will understand the physics of it, but I want to call it that which connects across space and time. So the future, the present, and the past are all connected on a thread of love. So it's sort of like the stuff of which the future is made. It's also the stuff of which the present and the past are made. It's the stuff of which it's made, it being all of it. And so we like to separate things as humans into these little bins. Is it the present? Is it the past? Is it the future? But the unconditional love is that human experience of, whoa, that's all combined. And I even tested that theory by checking whether people in controlled experiments could perceive future events that would otherwise not be perceived through their normal senses. There's something called precognition. Popular Mechanics just did a big article about it, and they interviewed me to discuss it. It was a big deal for them because it's popular mechanics. But anyway, it's this human capacity to perceive future events that when people are experiencing unconditional love, according to that questionnaire, if they're at higher states of that unconditional love versus lower, they're more accurate in perceiving these future events that are arranged by a random number generator.
Wow.
So it's like they're tying into the string that holds the beads together. If each bead is an event in your life, they're tying into that string that holds the necklace together. And if you do that, of course, you can travel in time in your mind, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it's making me think, I mean, as we're talking about kind of this idea of democratizing the future, and I see the through line to the question I'm about to ask you, but I'm thinking about this time in history, and while conflict has always been here in our human condition, it's certainly in my lifetime, it's hard to imagine a time when there's been the kind of conflict we're experiencing right now. So as we think about democratizing the future, and how love relates to this extraordinary ecosystem, conflict ecosystem that we're moving through together right now. I guess I just love you to riff on that a little bit, thinking about how everything you've just said also intersects with the idea of democratizing the future and navigating deep conflict, which we certainly have in our world around us.
Yeah. So two things. One is when people say there's always been conflicts and people are always going to have war, I feel like it's a mantra, like it's a thing we say to each other to reassure ourselves. Oh no, we're not doing poorly. That's always been this way. I'm actually not sure it's true.
Yeah.
I think there are cultures where you don't have that. I mean, I certainly know like there are hominids that don't have, like there are bonobos who don't have that. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like if they can do it, we can do it. They have lots of sex. Maybe having more sex is a good idea. So like, I don't know, seems reasonable. But so anyway, I just want to point out that that's kind of what I hear people say that almost reflexively, because we feel bad that we're in this situation where, at least in, the last 1,000 years, there's been a lot of conflict of which we are aware. I don't know that the current conflict is really any different than what has been going on. I think there's scarier weapons. So the conflict can hurt more people. And there are weapons of the mind and weapons of the soul, in addition to weapons of the body. And so it can affect these long-standing structures like families and ancestors and descendants. So I think that's true. Now, in terms of unconditional love, one of the things people often get wrong with unconditional love is that it makes them think, oh, if I really unconditionally loved myself and others, I wouldn't do anything. Like, if nothing needs to change, then everything's just fine, and I'll just be like sitting around, and like I'll never pay my rent, and I'll never get upset if someone does something unjust or anything. That's not it at all. In fact, feeling unconditional love allows you to feel empowered to do things. It's incredibly motivating, because before you had this approach of, if I don't like something, I'm going to withdraw love. And that's going to be what I do to try to control people's behavior. And that doesn't work very well at all. No one is motivated by that, right? If you notice the parenting styles that we have that are based on that, they're not great, right? They don't work.
Yeah.
And so what actually motivates people is love. If you stay connected, I recently had an interaction with a conspiracy theorist who I was like not liking his behavior. And I had to tell him about that. And at the same time, he's an influential funder, right? So I had to be like, all right, how do I do this? So I was just like, here's the deal. Like, I'm just going to put a boundary here. I love you, and I do. I think he's a neat guy. Like, honestly, he's out for good. In his worldview, he's out for peace. He's out for connection between people. He's out to change the world in a positive way. And I agree that the ways he wants to change the world are positive. So I said, maybe he's listening right now. Hi. But I said, I can't talk with you about your conspiracy theories. I can't listen to that, because it puts me in a state of trauma, and being re-traumatized, it doesn't feel good to me. But what I can do is talk with you about the work that we can do in the world together. And that is incredibly supportive without having to feel like I have to be re-traumatized to let go of my own boundaries.
Yeah.
And I've had to many times, as a supervisor of employees or as a leader in my community or in various organizations, I've had to say, I'm going to have to leave. I can no longer be your leader, or I can no longer or this person has to leave. I can no longer have this person on the team. We part ways with love. Like, this person's racist, or this person's whatever. That's not going to work here, And we're going to part ways with love, because withdrawing love, it backfires. It never helps. It never works, which is why I think the underlying message of all the people who are not sure how to think about DEI and trying to react to that and kind of worry that it's dividing things, I think that they could be right. Just like there's many things that the left or the right have done that divide things. Anything that removes love, that doesn't give you a place to connect with someone and work towards the future together. When you talked about, sorry, I'll finish that sentence. Anything that removes that connection and doesn't give you a place to work towards the future together makes things worse. So I feel like yesterday when you were talking with Aisha about the battlefield of the imagination, I think these zero-sum ideas, like a battle, it's don't do it.
Yeah.
Find the bridge, even if the person, and I'm not saying everyone can do this, because I certainly, with my own trauma, and I know this is true with other people in your trauma, when you're in certain states of processing whatever happened to you, and worse things have happened to other people than have happened to me, and worse things have happened, and you don't have to compare trauma, but the point is, when you're at a certain stage, all you can do is be angry. And all you can do is say, I am protecting myself by never talking with someone X, Y, or Z again. And you do that. And then if you continue to go through it, and you work through the grief, and you work through healing, and use unconditional love and start to recognize that as a source of power, it moves you naturally towards this capacity to say, where can we find a bridge where we can still have love? Like, no one's withdrawing love, but we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
And I am in deep disagreement with X, Y, or Z. And here's why. And I'm not withdrawing my love.
Yeah.
Because
Wow.
it's the only thing that moves us forward.
Yeah.
So that's what I think.
It's so interesting. We got into kind of an ongoing conversation about that even after the session, about how this idea of, so much of political life is win-lose oriented, and yet we are in a kind of part of a way to think about conflict is a win-lose, and that's our dominant way of thinking about it. But the truth is, this is just a situation where everyone loses if we stick with that metaphor.
Yes.
So everyone loses, and yet there are, by any measure, intolerable things also underway that are scary and jostling to our sense of peace and justice all over the world. And so,
right. So you use love as your power, right? So imagine, it's akin to this. I often think of, I've had friends who've been in abusive relationships, for instance. And sometimes I will coach them and say, you can absolutely unconditionally love your partner and never allow him into your space again.
Yeah.
In fact, hating him is more dangerous because you're more likely to go back to him because you'll be like, oh, now I love him again. It's like, that's the conditional love thing. That's a trick.
Yeah.
Right. But if you say, I unconditionally love myself, and so I know I need to get out of this relationship. I unconditionally love you. I see that this is how you are. I see it. You have shown me this is how you are. There's nothing needs to change. What needs to change in you is nothing, in me is nothing. But what needs to change in the situation is for me to leave or to take care of myself or whatever it is, right? And so if we can think about things that way, I think it's more productive. When you withdraw love and you move towards hate, and you move towards fear and anger, it creates a relationship. It creates a relationship where you're trying to not have one. Neutrality can only happen in this unconditional love space where it's like, I am not invested. I have no dog in this fight over whether you change. I'm not invested in that. Like, you are God's creature. So am I. And I'm going to put my body and soul and mind in a place that is going to be appropriate for me, period. And so I think when we're desperate to control each other's behavior and we start saying, you can't say this or you can't say that or whatever, it's because we're not taking care of ourselves. And so one of the things that futurism does is say, oh, but I'm going to be kind to my future self. Tomorrow I'd like to wake up and feel really positive about the people I was with today and the work I did today. So I'm going to make sure that I give that gift to my future self. And that's how we started thinking about Time Machine. Can I tell you a little about Time Machine?
Yeah, I do. And I love that. I love that part.
Yeah. So this experience I had as a kid, and then reading that in the psychoanalytic and the clinical psychology literature, reading that these kind of time travel narratives are very helpful for healing from trauma, including PTSD. And I thought, this is kind of like a little hidden gem in the literature. Therapists are doing this with their patients for decades and seeing the results, but it needs to be scaled. And I think people can do this for themselves, right? Just like I did as a kid. And so we got a grant from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to create Time Machine, which is this app that basically is very simple. It's an audio journaling app that allows you to speak to your past or future or present selves. You can choose a prompt, or you could go with no prompt. And then it will tell you, the next day when you have a message, and you can choose to open it that day and listen to it, or you can wait. Sometimes I do either. Sometimes I wait a long time. Sometimes I choose to open it. But we did a pilot study with about 96 people over 26 days and showed that this kind of self-talk, self-guided journey through your own timeline, when it's reinforced with unconditional love, which it turns out and the statistics was really important, we kept guiding people to listen to themselves with unconditional love. And when it's done in a community setting, we did these focus groups where we actually told people about the science of the app and how it was working psychologically, et cetera. When those things are true, there's a pretty impressive increase in overall well-being, self-reported, because That's the well-being of, the well-being of the person you're asking the question to is the one that can tell, is the one you're interested in. Yeah. And my favorite result is that we split the group into two: people who had worse adverse childhood experiences and people who had lower, like less or no. There were very few people with no adverse childhood experiences, but lower adverse childhood experiences. And as you would expect, the people who started off the study with worse childhoods, essentially with abuse and neglect, et cetera, had lower overall well-being statistically significantly than the ones who had better childhoods. We know that. But in the course of the 26 days, they ended up in the same place, which means that the folks who had the worst childhoods actually doubled the amount that they felt in terms of well-being during that time.
Yeah.
And I think it's because those are the ones who really needed to be spoken to. So then Amber Williams on our team brought this whole idea into Cook County Jail and worked with the mental health coordinators there. And then and with the inmates there were 13 men who she worked with over the period of 6 weeks. And then they asked her if she could stay for 2 more weeks because they loved it so much.
Yeah.
And it's this powerful experience of you're adding allies to your life. You're stronger because now you have not just what's here right now in this moment, but your past self and your future self at all different stages. They're pulling for you. Yeah. And it's phenomenal. And so then we took that idea into our more recent work, even with the telepathy tapes folks working with non-speaking people with autism. And we do meditations with them around creating an unconditional love bubble. And it calms them down immediately. And when I say them, I mean the non-speaker as well as their communication partner, like everyone, and the researchers. Everyone's calmed down because there's this, okay, we're in this unconditional love bubble. Let's see what happens. So this is something that we just carry into all of our work at Tilt. And it's because, I think love and time are the two big healers. People say, love heals all wounds, time heals all wounds. There's a reason for that. They're interwoven at a really fundamental level, I think. So, thanks for letting me talk about Time Machine.
Oh, that's great. I don't know. Are you familiar with them? All beautiful. And I'm having to pull myself together because per usual, anytime I have a long talk with you, I usually end up in tears in a good way. But it moves me deeply to hear you talking about that. And I always find myself like, I could just feel my heart opening up as you talk in ways that's just so precious and rare. So thank you for always being that force. Are you familiar with Dr. Jose Ramos's work? He does a lot of work. He did some work with my lab, with my social workers, related to the inner work of futuring. And, so much of what we learn about foresight proper is about the mental maps and the questioning of assumptions and all the tools and toys and games and all the wonderful stuff, opening up your conceptual maps and cosmologies and all these things. It's all fantastic. But he sort of has this whole area of his work that's about, what is the inner work of being able to navigate this well with and on behalf of other people, guiding them through these processes. I think you might really love his stuff.
Wow.
He's another wonderful conversant. A lot of people, I think, just focus more on that external, mapping and signals and all those things. But what about the shifts inside of each of us that make being a good conduit, a good channel of this work really work? And I found him to be really inspiring. Jose Ramos, I think you'd love him.
Thank you. And you reminded me of something in that, which is, in the academic world, like psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists, or a lot of the people who are doing this work of futuring, have had to justify why this is analytical, why this is scholarly, why this, and because, you're not really doing a science because you're not, as a cognitive neuroscientist trained at like ridiculously snooty institutions, and being raised by a theoretical physicist, I feel like I know that game. It does not get you very far. And all of those people have stories, if you listen to what happened in their childhood, that are very similar to mine. It's like they have decided to go in this track that privileges the left hemisphere, that privileges the analytical, that privileges being able to speak in a certain way or write in a certain way. And I get it because they're good at it, and I'm good at it too. I totally get it. But it also, when you're a cognitive neuroscientist, you're allowed to take some freedom that other people don't have, because I know that I'm smart, and I know that that people are under threat who don't have the same status that the field like neuroscience has.
Yeah.
And so I get to use that to say, hey, idiots, we have to start thinking about things other than like rats and mazes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We were talking about something before the session that you said you'd like to bring into the session. So I'm going to lay out a dream research project that's cooking in my head that I'm about to launch into regarding something related to this. And I'd love to get your input on camera and kind of just make it another spice in the soup today. And that is, as I've been journeying down this road, I'm a social worker, been a social worker for almost 40 years. And I'm looking at concepts like emotional and spiritual labor of doing this work, of those of us who are engaged in this. And over the last 10 years, I've been blessed to be in conversation, meaningful conversation with many people doing work in this future space, and learn more from them every day. So inspiring. And when you get us all away from work, what we're all talking about is how we're holding it emotionally and how we're holding it spiritually. But to my knowledge, I've never seen one single study where that's really the focus. And so I'm thinking of initiating, I and a few of my social work colleagues from my Social Work Futures Lab, we're going to plan to interview a cadre of futurists, working futurists, about how they hold spiritually and emotionally the work that we do. It can be scary. It can be challenging. You deal with a lot of resistance. There's a lot of emotional and spiritual labor that goes undiscussed as part of doing it. It's not all cognitive or just technical. There's also something else. And that something else takes something and also produces something from us. I'm just kind of curious what your reaction to that is, and how you would come at that. What, if any, advice do you have for me? And also, can I interview you for my study?
Yes, that sounds really fun. It's wonderful, and I do want to talk about it. And I see that it's time to. This probably has to be our last little bit.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to sort out something useful that I could say, except for that. That's an awesome thing, and I think that's probably more discussed in Afrofuturism quarters, because that's a field that is actively aware that they're tying in the left and right hemisphere.
Yeah.
And there's like weird sociology of futurism around like, oh, I have heard futurists say to me, well, we're not that kind of futurist. We do quantitative futurism. Oh, right. Okay, sure. I'm like, yeah. So you're making little boxes and then you're like making them numbers. So I think it gets down to this stereotype threat of if you're not doing this thing that's considered basically like behavioral economics. So if you don't have an equation for what you're doing and forcing this information that's lovely and multipartite and parallel and broad, if you're not forcing that into an equation, you're not doing it in a serious way.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you say that kind of study hasn't happened in futurism, you're talking about that kind of futurism. Because of course what that does is it's like if there's a bunch of water in a pan and there's two holes and you plug this hole, the water comes out of the other hole. I mean, like,
yeah.
And so if you're saying you can't talk about this, it's not part of futurism, we have to keep a reputation as serious scholars, it's going to come out of the other hole, which is right after work. How do I deal with this? And it ends up messing up this system.
Right.
It's like, guess what? We're all people. We all have hearts and minds and souls.
Yeah.
So I just hope that you do that. And I think the questions that I just totally want to be involved in, and the questions that I think really segmenting, like doing a meta-analysis of futurism, segmenting the futurism space into like how much credence do you give to individual like dreams or experiences, anomalous experiences, non-local experiences, anything that's in the mental versus the physical world. There's a tendency to believe only the physical world among the serious futurists, the academically behavioral economist type futurists, University of Chicago futurists. There's a tendency to say the only thing that matters is what's tied to the physical world. But the future of the entire human race is dependent on how we think about the non-physical.
Yeah.
And I mean that very seriously. And we're just starting to understand that.
Yeah.
If you read Dan Brown's new book, Secretive Secrets, and I'm not just saying that because he plugged me in the book, but in fact, because it's a cultural phenomenon, it's #1 on Amazon. It's all about how we have to start realizing that there's more to reality than the physical world.
Yeah.
Like, as the West, as America, as everyone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm just scanning through the comments, beautiful comments, lots of ideas, lots of engagement. Thank you, everyone, for offering so much of yourself and for sort of, I love somebody wrote feral for the future.
Yes!
That's a great sticker. Yeah.
Sticker.
I know. I love that one. Or the future feels like love. That's a beautiful one. So, I want to, I'm going to just pivot and begin a slight pivot. Julia, as we wrap up, I guess I want to ask you in closing, many people here, everybody who's joined us either now as we're listening in real time or will listen to this later, is all different levels of their futuring journey. Some people are just getting started. Some people are more advanced. Some people are kind of in the middle. What is your best thinking about what people most would benefit from to prepare themselves with conceptually related to your work? What do you think is the most important thing to have sort of in your knapsack of tools and capacities to bring love into the future?
The awareness that my work isn't important at all, but what's important is finding that way to experience unconditional love, whatever way it is for you. Awesome. My work is just all I care about is that people have that experience. That's what matters.
Yeah. Thank you, Julia.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful conversation, and per usual, you rock and nourish with your approach and your words and your energy, and I love you.
I love you too, Laura, and I can't wait to see what you're about to do next. I know you've had lots of losses in your life lately.
Yeah, you too.
And I'm with you there.
Yeah, it really, I think we've talked some about this. I mean, I think life seasons us to think about love and time in the future differently. And the experience of being alive and being a human in this world is pretty intense. The initiation processes into various stages of elderhood are pretty damn intense, but we're so lucky to have each other. I want to just remind anybody to last call for dropping any sticker ideas in the chat. And if you wake up in the middle of the night with an idea, don't worry. You can email unscripted@rwjf.org.
Sticker.
You're going to drop that in the chat. And I'm all about the stickers. I'm just telling you. If you found us today on LinkedIn, YouTube, be sure to sign up at www.rwjf.org/unscripted to receive updates on this series and future conversations. Before we go, I want to pass the mic to you, Julia, to tell us who you'll be talking with in tomorrow's episode of Unscripted. And I'll just give it back to you to do a little bit of chat about that.
Great. Also, I got excited. Sorry for interrupting you. I thought of a sticker. The future loves you back.
Love it.
Yeah. Cool. So tomorrow I'm super psyched. I'm going to be talking to Joan Mukagosi, and she is a sociologist and Afrofuturist, and she's done work with Data and Society Research Institute, and also on maternal health. I forget which organization. I'm sure she'll enlighten us. And she's done a lot of work on tech and AI. And so we're going to probably have an amazing conversation. So she's going to tell us about that. See us tomorrow at 3 Eastern, noon PT, other hours in the middle of the country that I used to live in.
Yeah, fantastic. Everybody, please, in the immortal words of Sting, send your love into the future. And thank you again for being here. Everybody, thank you to RWJF colleagues for taking such good care of us and lifting up this work in such a creative way. And we'll see you all tomorrow. Be well.
Lots of love.